Hello, everybody. Just wanted to give everybody a quick update. We're just waiting for some folks to join us yet, so we'll be waiting for a few moments, and then we'll kick everything off. As it starts right now, everybody will be on mute, and we will be using the question box in GoToMeeting to ask questions, or the chat. And then also you can raise your hand if you want to be unmuted to ask a question. So we'll go through those ground rules as well once we get rolling. But thank you everybody for attending.
All right, well, we waited a few minutes, so we'll get started. I have received a few emails, but we'll have a couple of people joining. They've had meeting conflicts, but hopefully as they get those finished, they can then join our meeting. I really wish we could have done this in person, but we all know what our state of affairs is right now. So thank you for your willingness to participate in this virtually. Again, I wish we could have a big drawing up on the board and I could point to it. I can't even really turn my computer on, or as far as the camera, because the internet's only so good today. So just want to introduce myself for those of you who don't know me, not that you haven't received quite a few emails from me over the last few weeks. My name is Brandy Williams and I'm the city engineer for the city of Fountain. And we have partnered with Wilson and Company to get us through the stakeholder process for our Fountain Master Transportation Plan, and really appreciate their willingness to help with this and guide us through the process. We're only about, 18, what feels like 20 years in the making. Our last plan was done back in 2002. So we're really excited to have them on board. We're excited to have all of you here and really kind of work through this process. We appreciate Colorado Springs, our affectionate partner to the north. Clearly, they've outpaced us in growth and will most likely continue to do so. But as we run out of places to expand, I think Fountain's really going to start stepping up. I think it's grown more than even the citizens of Fountain ever would have imagined. I talk to people who don't necessarily check populations every day, and they still think they're a city of somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 people, and we're on our way to up and over 30,000 people. So we know we need a plan, and we want to do our best to be ahead of it as opposed to behind it. So we're really excited for your participation, and I'm going to turn it over to Scott Asher from Wilson and Company.
Thanks, Brandy. Yes, I'm Scott Asher with Wilson and Company. I've been working with Brandy in the city on the transportation plan. Also with us today, I have Maureen Arujo, She's going to be doing most of the presentation, and she's been working through this very diligently. Kelly Friedel is also online. She's going to be helping answer questions that pop up, and questions that pop up, as well as if there's hands raised, things like that, to let us know. So that's sort of the team that's on this side of the world. With that being said, I wanted to set a couple ground rules, like I had mentioned when we first started broadcasting. First and foremost, the meeting is being recorded, so if there's questions that come up, we can always make sure we're not missing anything, and we can have that as we move forward. So there's that. Also, in this time of, big web presentations, we're going to ask that we're going to keep everybody muted. If a hand is raised, Kelly will notify us, and then we will unmute and let people ask questions. And then so then we can ideally try to answer, so we don't have a bunch of people trying to talk over each other at the same time. We'll also be working, you also have the chat function, as well as the questions area where in the web browser that you can use to ask questions. When we get to a point, we'll be able to answer those questions. We'll stop a couple times through the presentation to have discussion and ask questions. So with that, our agenda today really is like we've mentioned, is we want to sort of talk about the transportation network context overall of how the existing network works and is set up. We're going to look at the PPACG socioeconomic forecast, which help drive what the growths are, where things are growing, as well as is consistent with the PPACG model. We'll talk about the traffic forecast for 2030 and 2045 based on the networks, the existing networks, and then review the transportation plan master plan network that we've developed based on all the research and information we pulled together. And then we'll talk about the next steps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Maureen and let her get into talking about some of the context of the project.
Okay, so context. What do we mean by context? This City of Fountain's transportation network does not exist in an island. It's connected to the region. And so in planning for the network for Fountain, we have to look at those linkages and leverage both in terms of the system and the funding. So three elements are important in that, of these first three bullets. So the El Paso County Major Transportation Corridor Plan, PPACG's Regional Transportation Plan, and CDOT Federal Highway On-System Functional Classifications. And actually, that's a misnomer because PPACG is a transportation management agency due to its size and population. They do control some funding, and so there are routes that are classified as eligible for that funding. And then we want to look at the 2002 Transportation Master Plan that Brandy mentioned, that is very dated, but that's part of the context, as well as Fountain has annexation and comprehensive plans, and then the effect of growth and development build out, which may or may not be accounted for by the PPACG forecast. So next slide. So the first of the context elements is El Paso County's Major Transportation Corridors Plan. And what you see on this slide is their 2040 network. It was adopted by El Paso County in 2016, and it's constrained by what they believe is reasonably available funding for 2040. It does not include their vision for the future because of this financial constraint. So they also have a corridor preservation plan. And next slide, Scott. Slide's not changing on my screen. Next slide. Okay, got it.
Got it.
Yep. So this is our corridor preservation plan, and if you look at the area where Fountain is, you'll see there's some county in the edge, and annexation has been occurring to the east. But you'll see some major routes that are important in terms of right-of-way preservation. This is county's needs-based vision. It's a blueprint for right-of-way reservation. So we have Powers Boulevard, we have upgrades to Mark Sheffel, and we have an extension of Mesa Ridge Parkway out to the east, an extension of Meridian from Bradley to Squirrel Creek, and then Squirrel Creek taking on a bigger role as Peyton Highway is pretty far east, but also there, and Hanover as well is to be upgraded. Next slide. And then about the funding. This is CDOT's Fountain functional classifications. So as I mentioned, some of them are on system routes, I-25, State Highway 16, State Highway 85, 87, 21 Powers. But there's also local roads that have a functional classification high enough that they would be eligible for what's called STP funds or other funding sources. Next slide. So here we have PPACG's fiscally constrained network. So this is their adopted 2045 network, and it includes only projects for which funding, again, like the El Paso County 2040 network, for which funding would be reasonably expected to be available by 2045. The PPACG network can include projects that are federally, state, PPRTA, local, or privately funded. It's developed through a 3C federally mandated for funding and eligibility planning process. And its basis is for the model itself for the analysis is includes forecasts developed by and adopted by PPACG that have to be constrained at the county level to the state demographers' control totals. Next slide. I probably should have said on the last slide, so I'll just add that to keep it in your mind. You saw that that network was fairly sparse in the Fountain area because of that funding constraint. So let's look at what's happening in those supporting forecasts. So first looking at households, which the model looks at households versus dwelling units. But you'll see in this slide, just kind of to describe what's going on. The numbers are not numbers of households, they're the traffic analysis zone number. The blue is what was in place in terms of number of households in these traffic analysis zones in 2015. The green is what would be added between 2015 and 2045. So you see, especially out to the east, we have really small slivers of blue and a lot of green. So there's a lot of growth. And the relative size of these pie charts is tied to the numbers. You're familiar with pie charts. So let's look at what the actual numbers are on the next slide. So within all of the TAZs in PPACG's model that are City of Fountain TAZs, partially or completely, you'll see in 2015 we had roughly 14,000 households, and 2045 almost 27,000. So it's an increase of 12,700 roughly, and a 90% increase, so almost doubling. So we have a high growth in households occurring. And then the TAZs on the top, there's actually 44 TAZs that touch or are included within Fountain, but these are the top 10 in terms of household growth. And in these top 10, the growth is even more accelerated with increases of 1,230 households average for TAZ, and increases in percentage of over 2,000. And you'll see that 2 of the zones, we started with nothing and we're adding a lot of households. So these are areas that are not developed that would be developed in 2045. Next slide. So if we look at the employment piece, we see again the same notation with the pie charts, the blue what's existing, the green what would be there in be added in 2045, or would be there in 2045, excuse me. And you'll see that this is pretty different. What we kind of see is a pretty even thing. Same amount in 2015 as 2045, but there's a shift among the zones. Next slide. So if we drill into the numbers, first of all, we can say that there's stable levels of employment. And keep this in mind, because what this means in terms of regional travel, and remember we have a really sparse regional network, is that we're going to have a lot of work trips, commuter trips. They'll have to be handled by the regional connections that Fountain is lacking at this point. So there's actually in the PPACG forecast for all TAZs, there's a decrease of 200 and some in employment, decrease of 4%, but that's really a net zero. And there are some zones, the top 10, looking at again, where there's increases of an average of 85 employment opportunities, and an average increase in those zones of almost 500%. Next slide. So, good, I have a slide that shows the network. This is the 2045 network, and in this network, there are no capacity improvements within the Fountain study area. And you can see that there's very limited connectivity provided by the network regionally for Fountain. If we drill in and look at how you would go north, which is probably the dominant thing, and you have this eastern development, then Link Road is going to get a lot of pressure, and the intersection of Link Road with CNS and Mark Shuffle a lot of pressure. So we got to figure out some way to relieve that, because really people want to get either over to I-25 or north. Next slide. And what does that mean in terms of forecast? Because we tried to look at using the PPACG model. When was this going to occur? Because it's, you know, we're out there. It's not so horrible now, but when does this impact us? So we look at that area that I was talking about on the last slide. You see on Link Road, we got 7,000 to 8,000 ADT there now, the gray number. And by 2030, that would double. Yep, you got it, Scott. And then we're at 27,000. And this is in 2045. And this is a 2-lane principal arterial. So that's not going to work. But more importantly, this doesn't necessarily include all the development in the east, because it is the constrained forecast, and we have that intersection there that could be impacted. And I don't want to focus just on this area. You can see that there's not a lot of connectivity east-west, and there's really nothing north-south until you get to that intersection. Next slide. So this is the proposed network that we've come up with, and we've done some modeling on it, but we're not all the way through the solutions, as you'll see as I move through the slides. So on this, we have Powers Boulevard extended to what in the, I think, year 2000 feasibility study was an interim connection, and that's with an upgrade of an existing interchange on I-25. We also have thanks, Scott. Because I don't have mouse control. We also have a new interchange on I-25, and there's several east-west connections, 3 of them down on the south. And then we have some connection of existing roadways in the middle of the Fountain area, Wilson Road, a connection with Kane Road in Ohio, and Squirrel Creek Road. But probably the biggest thing that we think will be a relief valve, in addition to the Powers Boulevard, is extending Link Road north. And in our concept, we have it connecting to extended Cross Creek, which would not have an interchange with Powers, but it would get you to Mesa Ridge. So then it could be distributed between Mark Shuffle and Powers, or directly take Mesa Ridge Parkway to the west. Next slide. So I'm going to show you a little bit more detail, breaking out these areas kind of blown up for the north and the south. So as I mentioned, the Powers Boulevard extension will relieve connection on Link Road, and the Link Road north connection is another reliever that I went over. But we don't really have at this point in our planning process, we have not resolved the Mark Sheffel Road south connection issue. And there's some options, some reflected in the other plans, at least the 2060 Corridor Preservation Plan. Perhaps it could terminate at Mesa Ridge Parkway. Option 2, we could add an interchange for Mark Sheffel at Powers. We're concerned about how close those are. I think that was in the feasibility study, but we're not sure because of the terrain there, how that would work. There's the creek that goes by. And a third option that is kind of really pie in the sky would be to pull Mark Sheffel out and extend it to the south. So next slide. On this slide, I'm showing you the rest of the concept in terms of where the interchanges would be on Powers. So this new connection would have a new interchange at I-25, and then there would be interchanges with these connecting links to Old Pueblo Road. Next slide.
Maureen, do we want to pause quick to see if there's
questions? That's right. We were going to pause to see if there was questions.
We're dumping a whole bunch of information really fast.
Well, yeah, and I am a pretty fast presenter, but at least we can get to the questions.
Okay, we do have a few questions on the line. So if you have questions as we're going through these, just type them in the chat box. If you'd like to speak, just click the hand raise button, and then after we get through these written questions, we'll call on people who have verbal questions. So the first question, how can we tell who's on the line?
And what we've done is we've opened that up. We didn't realize it was private, so you should be able to go to the attendees and button and click down, and it should show everybody that is participating in the meeting. Right now we have about 29 attendees, so there's a good group of folks joining us today, so thank you very much for that.
Okay, thank you. The second question, when was the PPACG model last updated?
2018. Actually, that was an entirely new model, the tour-based model.
Okay.
Well, not entirely. It was built on the other models.
Okay, the next question is, please provide a copy of the presentation.
Sure, we can do that. I'm glad I added the bullets.
Okay, next question. Powers Boulevard, State Highway 21 is a freeway in its entirety.
Could you repeat that?
So I think she was pointing out that Powers Boulevard, State Highway 21 is a freeway in its entirety.
Yes, I mean it ultimately that is what the plan is. I think it's currently shown.
Yeah, I think the confusion is probably ultimate versus what it exists as today. That is true. The entire length of Powers Boulevard from North I-25 to South I-25 ultimately will be a freeway classification. But as an interim, it exists as expressway in some locations. If I took the model further up, you'd see it was freeway in part of it.
Great, Thanks. Next question. Seems like some of this effort would be fundable with a partial or full toll road approach. Are you considering funding?
Yes, after we, well, that's one of our next steps, is to develop a funding structure, which could have many components, and that could be a possibility. I don't know on Powers whether that is the case, which would be probably the only roadway that might be applicable. Probably the state would have to comment.
Okay. Next question. When were the socioeconomic data last updated?
2016, I believe. Maybe 17, but around the same time that the model was updated. And I believe PPACG is doing an update now and maybe taking a different approach to that update.
Okay. That is all of the comments that I see in the chat. Just looking quickly for any raised hands. I don't see any hands raised. So Maureen, please continue with the next slide.
Okay, well, I'm hoping for more interaction because we don't have a lot of slides. I apologize that I just kind of whipped through this. And so if anyone thinks of a slide they'd like to go back to, we can do that. So our next step is that we have ongoing development of new design standards and cross sections for the city of Fountain. We weren't ready to share that today, but we're getting close on that. And then, as you saw, we need to finalize the transportation network for the plan and define right-of-way reservation requirements. And to that funding question, another part of it is going to be to adopt implementation strategies. And part of that is to create a funding framework. What are all the funding sources that Fountain can tap? They did approve a resolution to develop a transportation impact fee. So they'll still be refining that, and this plan will provide them some input to updating that. And then to develop prioritized phased implementation plan, of which links go first and how they will be funded.
All right, I'm going to interject real quick. And
good. I was just going to ask you and Scott to jump in. So
yeah, and this is more logistics. If anybody else is having trouble raising your hand because I just got an email and said they tried to and they couldn't, you can just send me an email. I'm checking my email and we'll figure out how to make it so that you can join the conversation. So is there any way we can unmute Victoria?
oh, Scott can do that, yeah?
Scott, can you see if you can get that to work on your end?
Or I think I can. Just a minute.
Yeah, hang on. Victoria. Oh, there's Victoria. Let's see. Did it unmute? Victoria, you need to unmute yourself. It says you're self-muted, so I can't unmute you. There we go.
Ta-da!
There you are. Hopefully you're there.
Hear me?
Yep, now we can hear you.
Awesome. So on those PPACG numbers, I think you probably want to do some adjustment to those and not use them as is. I will
Sorry, but anyways, go ahead.
Oh, because it doesn't seem realistic to me to not have any employment growth given what has happened in Fountain in the last 10 years. The number of employment I've seen are huge. So when I did the MTCP, I did not take the models from the PPACG or the numbers from the PPACG model as is. I looked at what was happening, what has been happening, where it's been happening, where there's vacant land, and I made some adjustments to those PPACG TAS numbers. And I would really highly suggest that you do that because having no employment growth in Fountain is not going to happen.
Thank you. That's a good suggestion, and we were headed in that way. As I mentioned, I didn't show any forecasts for the new network because we need to adjust those. And now I understand what you're saying. And actually, I think the new process that PPACG intends to use for the forecasts will be more interactive with the jurisdictions in benefiting from what they know is on the ground.
Great. Yeah, it's definitely important to look at this because that's really going to drive your network. And while you'll never get them right, I think we can make them better than what PPACG had expected back then.
Okay, and to clarify my response where I misunderstood what you were saying, Victoria, I thought you meant the forecasts that I had on the network, which I had done significant adjustment.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and Victoria, I know you're absolutely right, because I know we've been talking about that too, because there's some big employment plans, you know, in Southwest part of Fountain and on the west side of I-25, and you know, there's some big things happening up, you know, up towards Schriever and the northeast parts. I mean, that is something that we've been talking about, and we do need to get those dialed in better for the forecast.
Yeah, and it's not just employment, because I mentioned that what's in the forecast for the growth, particularly along the eastern side, is an understatement of
Yeah,
that.
I agree with you. Okay, thanks.
You bet.
Okay, we've got a couple more comments in the chat. The next two are somewhat related, so I'll read them together. The first one, it may take some time to digest the information before coming up with questions. Then following to that, if we get a copy of the presentation, can we set up a time to do follow-up questions once we've had the ability to further review the information?
I can interject on that one.
Okay.
So as was mentioned, we haven't quite finalized the street cross sections. So this is kind of a step one to, yes, definitely present this, have you digest it, and follow-up questions. We'll finalize the street cross sections, send those out, and then we'll bring everybody back together to talk about the network in conjunction with the street cross sections. So if you could send to me, Brandy Williams, those questions, we'll compile them and get that back to you guys. Hopefully, I mean, we'll see how it works, probably by the end of the year. I don't imagine we're going to have a follow-up probably till January, but we wanted to give you guys time to digest this and not rush too much with the holidays. Hopefully that answers your question, Cody.
Well, and we'll send out the presentation which has this information, but Scott, maybe if you change to the last slide that has the contact information as well. It has Brandy's email and yeah. So we've got Brandy at the top. She's offered to be the main point of contact, and she'll, I guess, filter to us whatever we can help with.
Okay, next question. Since the PPACG model is from 2018, how is projected volumes being adjusted to account for growth in the airport business park?
That is the adjustment process that I talked about. So the model, the raw assignments from the model should never be used directly. And there is an industry standard process for adjusting them. And one component, if you have a major traffic generator, is that you approach that as you would a traffic impact study and identify if that's not included in the basic forecast for that traffic analysis zone. That would be an add-on using ITE rates. So that was part of the process that went into the adjustment, is looking at those traffic impact studies.
Okay, and that is the final chat question. Brandy, have you received any more emails regarding People who have verbal questions?
I have not, so I guess I'll take that as a good sign. Right now, though, I'm going to interject kind of with my own question. Scott, can you pull up a map that shows Fontaine? So maybe our North Network map, please.
That'll be slide 15, I think.
It helps on mute when I'm talking. It looks like Tim Siebert might have his hand raised. So I will go to that slide and I will.
Ooh, I think I actually see a hand. Looks like John Los Pasos has his hand raised.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to go through to see how all that's working. So, yep, John does, Tim does. I'm trying
Yeah, I think it's finally working.
Yeah.
Can't move to that slide.
Hang on.
All right, well, you can, it looks like, Tim, your microphone might actually, oh, it was working, now it's not.
There we go.
Go ahead, Tim. While Scott finds that slide, you can ask your question.
Great, thank you. I appreciate everyone's, we all know how the technology is a challenge, but relative to the PPACG model, I'm the one who asked about the model question and then about the business park. Just trying to understand, Maureen, your comment was that you've made those adjustments. So is it a fair statement that the data you're providing here, at least in this presentation, has been adjusted based upon all the inputs from the region? That would be business park, growth in Banning Lewis Ranch, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
No, that would be an overstatement. What I meant was the slide where I had the forecasted volumes for a very limited area, which, yes, for kind of the North Network, that I have adjusted those volumes. Those are not raw assignments from the model, is what I meant.
Okay, so what you're showing as 2030 and 2045 volumes here have been adjusted for, like I said, business park growth.
Right.
Estimated background traffic coming from Banning Lewis Ranch or other areas of the city that would look to move south. Is that a correct assumption?
Yes. Yes, although we don't know all of that information, and that's not the only things that were used to adjust it. I did look at the traffic impact study for the airport park. I looked at CDOT's Otis forecasting, which is a historic trends-based forecasting for I-25 and the state highways, for example. And I used this industry standard process that looked at how the model did in 2015, how it did in 2045, and you make an adjustment to that. But it's still based on PPACG's forecasts. And if they don't know what's going on in Banning Lewis, and as I said, they're using a different process moving forward to do their forecasts, and they are updating their forecasts. Really, this presentation was focused on identifying the fact that there are deficiencies or inadequacies in the regional connections to the network that need to be addressed by Fountain in their transportation master plan. And these numbers, including the socioeconomic numbers, which are probably understated as well, tell you how urgent that problem is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you,
John?
Tim.
So John, I've unmuted you. It looked like you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I just, I think at the time it wanted just to interject, but Maureen sort of went back and sort of already said what I was going to say, that again, Victoria is absolutely right. You got to take a lot of this stuff with a grain of salt because it's based on some numbers that came from some programs that I'm not sure that we're going to be using anymore. In fact, I know we're not. Urban Sim was the sort of the land use model that we were using. And at this point, we are not intending to continue to do that. In fact, our overall approach to both the social economic model as well as the transportation demand model is that instead of making assumptions on our own through some sort of academic exercise and planting a flag in the ground and drawing a line in the sand saying, well, this is what it is and you have to conform to us. Our approach in the future is going to be rather reaching out to the jurisdictions and taking their estimates and stitching them together. And then where those plans have some issue because we're either falling short of the numbers as proposed by the state demographer that are the control total, or where we're over in those numbers, is when we'll get those groups back, we'll get the jurisdictions back together and sort of work it out cooperatively as to what those numbers will be. Unfortunately, that was not the way it was done last time. Assumptions were made and that was that. And you could take the number or leave the number. And that's not the way we want to do it anymore. So
Right.
there will be changes.
Thanks, John. And I was trying to express that on your behalf, and I'm glad that you stepped in and better explained it.
But Maureen, you're absolutely right. I mean, the overall picture, whether it's percentage of being correct or not, is that there's overall the connectivity with the region. Fountain is not a suburb just off to the side. It's a major part of the region that is going to have a huge role in economic growth as well as overall transportation generation. So those connections need to be fortified. And whether the numbers are exact or not, your presentation did a great job of giving the gist of we need greater connections down in that area, especially looking at powers and some of the other connections that are depicted there.
That was what I was trying to tell. And what happens to Mark Shuffle? It can't just end there. So.
Yeah, and Victoria, I don't know if you want to say something, but I think the county has made clear their intention for Mark Shuffle is not to become the de facto roadway in the area. It just can't handle that. So right. We definitely need to look at a system solution for that area because it is such a great connection for the whole region.
So Scott, I think the slide that Brandy wanted is the next one. So just go one down.
One down.
Yeah, either one is fine. Just something that shows Fontaine.
Okay.
So,
all right.
I'm going to take advantage of the fact that we've got the city and the county on this call, and hopefully don't have 3 other calls going at the same time. We're looking at Fontaine Boulevard, as you can see at the top, our east-west blue line. And if I could politely ask everyone to do their homework, we're trying to figure out where the city owns Fontaine, the county owns Fontaine, who maintains Fontaine. And the reason that this is part of this conversation is because, fortunately or unfortunately, the city of Fountain annexed a piece of property that borders Fontaine, even though it's not even remotely contiguous to the city limits of Fountain. So that was clearly before my time. But we have an island of city of Fountain annexation up there that borders Fontaine Boulevard. And we would just like to get everybody's input on what we want to do with Fontaine. I don't know if there's a long-term thought or if there's been conversation as to whether the city wants it or the county wants it, or we're just going to keep sharing it back and forth. Again, I have no opinion either way. I just figured since we're going through this exercise, and no, you don't need to weigh in now. I'm not going to put anybody on the spot. But if anybody has any opinions on Fontaine, I'd love to hear it. If nothing else, hey, we'll look into it and get back to you, just so we can keep that conversation going as we get through this process. No one's volunteering to raise their hands, so Maybe Kelly has something in the chat, and if not, then we'll just continue the conversation. But I just wanted to put it out on the table while I've got everybody in the same virtual room.
I don't see additional chat comments and no hands raised as of yet. So back to you, Maureen.
So, oops. Yeah.
No, probably back to Scott.
Yeah.
Because
the one thing I'd like to just have the conversation on is see if people have any thoughts. I know this slide that we have up right now is the North Network connection, is John had alluded to, and I think Victoria as well, is that, you know, Mark Shuffle right now is a principal arterial that comes and dead ends into not dead ends, transitions to CNS Road, which is more of a minor arterial. And we had sort of those three different options, and just was wondering what people had thoughts on how that Mark Shuffle, you know, how that should sort of transition at that point. Should it be, like we said, we have those three different options of, you know, just terminating it at the principal arterial at Mesa Ridge and then sort of downgrade Mark Shuffle as it goes south from there, eliminate it, you know, add access or an interchange at Powers. Again, there's some challenges with that potentially. I think we can take a look at that. Or the idea of extending that road sort of north-south, east of Powers, and sort of paralleling it. So just some thoughts I wanted to throw out there for some discussion.
yeah, and we've got those bullets on this slide. So if we distribute the slideshow and people want to think about it, they can get back to us. But that's the problem. And obviously, as Scott said, we're not proposing that Mark Shuffle goes away. There's land use and access along the southern part, but maybe it's downgraded in that connection to CNS, because CNS.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Victoria, I just unmuted you. You had your hand up, and then on deck is Tim has his hand up.
Okay, well, I'll start with Fontaine. I know in our NPCP, we plan on Fontaine going from 2 to 4 lanes. I don't know, you know, off the top of my head who owns what parts of it, but I will look into that. It is sort of an important east-west connection. There are some land use constraints, but I think it does have an ability to go to 4 lanes. So continuing to work together to figure out how we make that happen would be a good thing. And I'm sure Jennifer may have some thoughts on who owns the road here in the future, but she may not be willing to share those yet. On Mark Shuffle, I'm interested to hear what Tim is going to have to say, and I'm not sure which Tim that is. I guess I'm kind of hoping it's Tim Roberts, because at some point we need to figure out what Banning Lewis is going to be doing through there, what the city is planning in the future, because a big chunk of that road is owned by the city, and I'm not sure what their plans are now that they've eliminated Banning Lewis Ranch Road.
Okay. And so Tim Seibert was the one that was hand up, and let's see.
So Victoria, I'm happy to let Tim Roberts answer that question if he's on the line. But I was going to talk about Banning Lewis Parkway. You know, the challenge with extension of Banning Lewis Parkway south of Drennan is physical as well, with Jimmy Camp Creek and now the VA Cemetery's acquisition adjacent to that is very, very complicated when you look at that section of land between Bradley and Drennan east of Mark Shuffle. And so that my comment was basically to stress the importance of Mark Shuffle as a north-south connector, because Banning Lewis Parkway is very challenged in its extension. Obviously, Fontaine, when you look at current plans, and I don't know what's happening with Fontaine relative to the sections in Lorson Ranch east of Jimmy Camp Creek Park, but there doesn't appear to be big connection roads that would go through there either. So again, I think understanding the bigger connection issues with Banning Lewis Parkway, how Lorson Ranch is developing, and how Fontaine will extend to the east, Meridian Road, Curtis Road ultimately I think needs to be on the table from a county regional standpoint because of the employment generation out at Schriever Air Force Base. So all that being said, I think putting all those things in a pot and stirring it around are going to help inform this decision.
So Scott, I see you put this up.
Yep, I was just.
And that does, and this is kind of a screenshot of a small piece of the corridor preservation plan, and you can see the piece that's in the city of Colorado Springs of Fontaine Boulevard is kind of in between Powers and Mark Shuffle.
Yep.
So Lorson already does have a plan to continue Fontaine through their development out east to connect to Meridian Road. A lot of that part already built in Lorson Ranch is already separated with a median and urban. So I think there's a very good chance of that road being extended east.
Okay.
Now that I was able to expand my attendees list, I see this lovely question mark column, and Don Gravette has his question mark highlighted. Yep. I don't know if that means that Don has a question or
yes,
how that column works. So maybe we want to see if Don's got something he wants to ask.
So Brandy, thanks. There's a question in the chat. I just wanted to make sure we wrapped up the Mark Shuffle conversation. We can go ahead and jump to that now. As you know, our development plans for a north-south roadway running from Mesa Ridge South, west of Powers, and eventually could connect to the interchange south of Wilson Road at Powers. Whether this is considered a continuation of Mark Shuffle or Mesa Ridge, this will provide an additional north and south road.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kelly.
And Don. Okay, let's see. Tim Seibert, did you have another question? You had your hand raised.
I'm trying to turn it off, so sorry about that.
Nope, you're good. Oh, now you just muted again.
That's what he intended to do, Scott.
Oh, okay.
That's what he was saying. And too little, too late. I could share screen if we get into some more questions that are network outside of Fountain. I pulled up this functional class plot of the whole county, but just so you know, I have it. We could share screen if needed. None of the stuff in Banning Lewis Ranch that Tim was talking about is labeled in terms of the streets, so not sure what it is.
Okay. Trying to think, are there other thoughts or other questions?
Todd's got a question.
Yeah. Oh, wait, hang on. There we go. Todd. Okay, so Todd, you need to unmute yourself. I just unmuted you. Hopefully. Oh, There we go.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, now we
Yes.
can hear you.
Okay. Tim Roberts is not on the line, so sorry to disappoint. The two of us were triple booked, so we're tag teaming this effort. I'll just weigh in. I'll just sort of reiterate what Tim Seibert said, that Mark Shuffle becomes an important north-south connector in this area, and it's a road that's in the city. That's part, will be evaluated and looked at, and from in our transportation plan update that is currently ongoing. So that's so we'll be looking at forecast and potential development patterns in that part of the world, and what are the future needs from Mark Shuffle, at least within the city section. On Fontaine, I don't know. I mean, it's most of the roads in the county, it just sort of seems to make sense to leave it in the county and not have a little section that's either in Fountain or in Colorado Springs. But how these things go. Honestly, I go either way on who has control of Fontaine and what happens. I would just sort of reiterate what others have said, is in this area, it is with Mark Shuffle and Powers coming in from the north, it becomes an important east-west connector in the area. And so, yeah, I could definitely see a need for that to have additional capacity in the future. So anyway, I just wanted to weigh in on a couple of those items. That's all I've got.
Thanks,
Todd.
Todd. That's great.
No problem. You're welcome.
You got Jennifer.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and unmute. Oh, there you are. You're unmuted, Jennifer. Go for it.
Good morning, everybody. Jennifer, Irving County Engineer, and I just want to thank the group for including us, and as we continue to coordinate on these important quarters. Just want to thank you for all the hard work, and I'm sure Victoria and I will be meeting and getting back to you with some good comments. With respect to Mark Shuffle, it is an important roadway. We've thought that for a long time. And as hopefully we're all looking at our major transportation corridors plan, we can coordinate and develop a good coordinated long-range plan for this. One of the original plans was Mark Shuffle Road, as it's making this connection. Similar to what Maureen mentioned on one of the other roads, was that it would go either over or under Powers and not make an interchange connection, and have that connection more with the Mesa Ridge Parkway. So that's, I think, another option. Maybe that's a bullet point that maybe should be considered, but we'll put together those. But happy to continue to coordinate with our partners. In regards to Fontaine Boulevard, there are some portions that are already 2-lane, and some that are existing 2-lane, and some that have already been upgraded to 4-lane. When we did our PPRTA extension in 2012, we looked at putting money into that or Mesa Ridge Parkway. At the time, there was a case made for doing improvements to Mesa Ridge Parkway, so that was prioritized for us through public comment, through our MTCP, and through coordination with the developers. I do see the need for Fontaine to go to 4 lanes, and in fact, in Lorson Ranch, it's already 4 lanes. And will continue to be expanded. As far as the portions that are in the county and jump in and out of the cities, I think it's important that we all work together. From my perspective, at some point, it doesn't make sense to remain in the county, and I think we just all need to work together and figure out the right plan for that, especially. And I think we're going to have to maybe have a meeting and have a discussion here pretty soon, as that large development in the city of Fountain is ongoing. there's a large portion in there that is actually already outside of the county. And Brandy, we'd be happy to provide you with what we think we own and maintain, and probably need to validate that with each city. Other than that, we appreciate all the work that you're doing and look forward to working with you closely. Thanks.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. And that's kind of what I'd like to do, is at least if we can come to an agreement on who owns what where, let's start there, and then figure out who wants to own what where in the next 5 or 10 years. I think that'll be helpful, because it's kind of where the 2 cities in the county all come together in the same place. So if we can figure this out now, we don't have to be snow plowing and stop snow plowing for 2 miles in the future.
Do I
Yeah.
still have audio?
Yep.
Oh, I would agree. I want to make sure that this is not one of those roadways that we can't all work together on, and then as a result have a bunch of traffic from development and have no plan for improvements. We've had several of those and want to make sure that at least even if the county remains maintaining a portion of that we make sure that the improvements are done to accommodate the additional development traffic, whatever that is. Thank you.
Real quick question, is the development, Jennifer, you referred to called Corvallis?
I don't know, Brandy would have a better idea of what that is since it's in the city of Fountain.
It is. Yep, that is the development that we're talking about.
Any other comments or questions? I know we've heard from a lot of folks online, and it's been great. I don't know if CDOT folks have anything they want to weigh in on at all. I know they've been listening intently. Oh, there's Jason. Let me get Jason. Okay. Need you to unmute yourself now, Jason. Nelson. Oh, hang on. God, sometimes.
You click it and it doesn't click.
I know, that's what I was trying to do. It's like, okay, so now it says he's self-muted. So Jason, it says you're self-muted. So see if you can hit your mute button. No, don't. Here we go. Oh my gosh.
Oh, there we go.
Hey, there we go.
That was awful. Apologies for that. No, you know, the state supports its partners, so we're here just to learn and see what how we can work with you guys in the future. So I really do appreciate this presentation. I'm really eager to get a hold of it and go over it in greater detail. So no, I appreciate it.
Okay, great. All right. Any other comments or questions? Otherwise
we can package the.
Oh, got it. Shane says he agrees.
Oh.
In the comments.
With Jason, got it. Cool. Thanks, Shane. All right.
And I'm assuming Jennifer's hand is just still up because it hasn't gone back down, but.
Yep. And Jason's too, so I'm assuming that's the same thing.
Well, I will package the presentation and forward it to Brandy to send out to everyone. And we really, really appreciate your attending and your input.
Yeah, Brandy, do you have any closing comments?
Yeah, we don't need to take up 2 hours if we give you some time back in your day. I always love when meetings end early because then I know that time's already blocked off and I can hopefully catch up on all the other stuff I haven't done yet. So thank you for your time. We will definitely send out that presentation. We'll compile your questions. We'll be working on the cross sections, and I may be reaching out to some of you individually just to get your input on those before we send them out publicly. If there's anybody else you would like me to add to this list, also send me their email address, and I think that should be it. So appreciate your time. Thank you for your input and look forward to working our way through this process. That's all I've got, Scott.
Brandy, I'll just squeeze in one last comment from Valerie at CDOT and me specifically. Appreciate the partnerships we have with our local agency partners.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly.
Great.
All right, Scott, it's all yours to close out.
Yep. So again, thank you, everybody. We will end the recording here now. We look forward to following up and having future conversations, as Brandy said, probably in January, once we get everything compiled and move forward and continue moving this forward. So thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
You got to delicately get out of this thing, remember?
I know.
Stop recording. You can push that button.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody.
And guys, I will send you the video as soon as it's done downloading.
Perfect.
Lisa, can we put that online at all?
Yep.
That would be helpful. I don't know. Can you guys do that, or do I need to go through John Schultz to get that done?
Oh, we can do it.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that would be great.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks, Lisa.
I think I have it. There we go. Exit.